Hello, 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 friends. Nicholas here. Devo, TED Talks, Devoted Talks. And, what's on my mind right now is some talks we had, and I haven't thought about it in a while, but, when you learn psychology and sometimes biology or the mix of the two, you learn about this case called Phineas Gage. And it's a man who had a railroad spike go through his frontal cortex. Nothing was severely damaged enough that it was inoperable or he couldn't be helped. But after the spike was removed, his personality was completely different. He became a new person, he became more violent and more aggressive and just different than what he had been before. And it was very noticeable. And, that was one of the hallmark cases of learning about the frontal cortex being personality, but also being related to executive function. And so today after class, we have an ERPA and an engineer, and they were talking and just geeking out on, situations that they had. And it was fun to watch them and listen to them talk, but also as it relates to different medical stuff that I have, studied and learned over the years. I'm thinking about something as simple as, I don't know, a concussion in the frontal cortex, like getting into a bad road accident and you slam your head into something, or your head goes back and the brain smashes up against your skull internally and causes a hematoma or some kind of contusion that completely warps your personality. I mean, I heard reports of a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old getting bit by a tick, but they didn't know it, and they weren't able to diagnose Lyme's disease until it was in its latter stages. And if any of you know about that disease, in its latter stages, the spirochetes can get into the brain and essentially drill into the tissue. And so in this child's case, it drilled into this frontal cortex region, and this sweet child all of a sudden became this nightmare of a kid, but it's not anything he could help because of the disease and the disorder. Now this topic is very sensitive to me because it's hard for me to square the fact that I believe and know that we exist outside of this corporeal existence, but any damage to this actual physical thing can change the way that we interact with the world or understand the world or even remember the world, right? Like she was talking about a guy who had a frontal cortex stroke who couldn't remember who he was. He had an amnesia and, he couldn't remember how to do patterns that he had done for years and years and years because he couldn't remember who he was. And of course, there's different things involved with this. Like there was heavy drinking and there was a fall, but also a stroke. And so there's a lot of contributing factors. But this seemingly instant where you can go from being who you've always known yourself to be to transforming to those around you, and yet you don't even know that, or be maybe not even aware of it. To you, you're just being yourself. And so, the sensitivity for me comes from we're in this fragile body that follows these amazing principles that we understand as Ayurveda and yoga and, Sankhya's philosophy, but there are certain things that are bypassers of these patterns. Now, that's not saying these people can't come back from these injuries. And I do think if anything was going to be able to help people back from these traumatic things, it would be yoga and Ayurveda and consistent treatments in ways that help remedy the acute or even chronic disorder that has been there. And some might argue that, it's a kavaigunya in the brain that was just waiting for some kind of stimulus to activate the disease and the disorder, which that's possible. And it could be a karma. It could be a karma that was, situated long before this soul ever took a body. And so it's playing out its soul's desire. That's another way that, the parampara and the, procession of bodies and reincarnation, I mean, that could explain it as well. But as I said, it's sensitive because it really depends on what you believe as to why something like this might happen, or even, what caused it. Was it something random? Was it something predestined? I don't know. That's for the person who experienced it and or the people who it deeply affects to decide for themselves. Because at the end of the day, life is meaningless. It is us who ascribes meaning to it. And do you know what part of us actually starts to ascribe meaning? This part of us that understands ourselves, the frontal lobe, and its interaction with the world. And yeah, like imagine hitting your head so hard that you could be a completely different person soon after. It's wild. My client that just left here, she was talking to me about one of her first ICU cases, and a guy had come in from a car accident, and he had extreme trauma to his frontal cortex from that car accident. And they had to do a partial lobectomy, as in cutting out part of his frontal cortex. And she said before the surgery and right after, he was like a gorilla as far as his grunting and his very animalistic behaviors, because there was so much damage and so much trauma. And then there was no place for his soul to be translated and expressed into the world. It's going to have to be rebuilt. I think it can be rebuilt, and I think Ayurveda would agree with that as well. But wow, like think about that. Like he didn't ask to be in that car accident in a typical sense, and yet the rest of his life is going to be affected completely by that. You know, it's awe-inspiring, and it's a gobsmack as well to notice how fragile we are. And yet, you know, we are equipped with lots of tools to keep us robust and keep us filling our cups and keeping us from depleting. And, you know, I don't get to make these decisions for the things that are going to happen, no matter how much I think I'm in control. And so, what does one do with an acknowledgement of their mortality, but also an acknowledgement of their frailty, even when they're in their most robust stages of life? In my case, I see it as an opportunity to be thankful that I get the opportunity to show up as my best self and not be fearful always about the things that might happen to me. That doesn't mean that I won't have mixed feelings if something does happen to me. I don't know if I'm diagnosed with cancer, what I would feel like. I don't feel like I'm ever going to get diagnosed with cancer. It's not very common in our family, except for prostate cancer, but that tends to happen in the latter years for the men. And I tend to have lived a healthier life than that. That doesn't mean I'm not going to get it, but I don't know how I'm going to respond. But I also, like, what if I have something that causes such a traumatic brain injury that I don't remember who I am? Or my concept of self or my ability to learn is completely altered. Like, what would that do to my life? And the answer is I don't know, but I'm not fearful of it. I just know that when it happens, if it happens, that at that point I will make decisions related to it. And so, you know, that's all Ayurveda and yoga can ask of us, is that, can you be okay with the things that happen to you? Right? Or are you going to forever be trying to change it or wish it different or trying to make it different? Or suffering because you can't have it another way? I don't know. I hope that I show up with the best intentions and best feelings possible, and that I show grace for myself and others completely, and especially for others who may be going through that. But also the humility to know that if it's my turn to have that experience, that there's a reason behind it. And I have to have faith that that's true. Can you say that? It's hard for me to know, because I'm trying to imagine things that haven't happened yet. I don't know how I'm going to show up. I would hope that all the spirituality I've learned would guide me in fruitful and helpful ways, and that faith would carry me. But if I had a brain injury that causes those faculties to be different, who knows? I may become a heretic. I don't know. Or maybe I'll become even more spiritual. Maybe I'll have an NDE, a near-death experience, and see God. I mean, who knows? But I know today that I don't have to suffer for things that haven't happened by worrying about them. I can deal with them when they come. And in the meantime, be well, be free.